Parliament as paramount and which was not subservient to any other group, however powerful. People knew that the necessary changes would take time, but they wanted us to make a start right away. Now they expect us to do what we are elected to do and not to be deflected by the fears or the indignant cries of Labour politicians whom they sacked last May. Our objective is clear: to return to steady economic growth earned by people's own efforts in a free and responsible society. And our first priority is to restore sound money and conquer inflation. We don't pretend that that alone will be sufficient to revive our economy, but we know that it is the essential precondition. We know, too, that freedom and social justice will be in peril unless we can get inflation out of the economic system. The Right Honourable Gentleman and Honourable Members opposite challenge us because the retail price index has risen since the election. Let me remind the House what the Right Honourable Member for Leeds East said here on the 25th of January 1979. He said, "Let us assume, for example, that the increase in the nation's earnings in the current pay round is as high as 15%. The most obvious and inevitable consequence of this assumption coming true would be that the rate of inflation would probably reach about 13% by the end of the year." That was his prediction if wage increases reach 15%. The reality was that earnings over the last pay round rose not by 15% but by 16-17%. So on the Right Honourable Member's own arithmetic, the rate of inflation would have been over 13% by the end of the year, and that before anything he would have done if he had continued as Chancellor on indirect taxes, and before the doubling of oil prices, which has added and will continue to add to the index. The charge that we have been responsible for all or even most of the price increases since the election is thus blatantly false. The Right Honourable Gentleman rightly said, we did increase prices in the budget, value-added tax and other customs and excise duties. And the purpose of that increase, as the House knows, was to switch from direct to indirect taxes, thereby reducing tax on the pay packet, a cause which the Right Honourable Member opposite occasionally espoused when he was Chancellor, not frequently enough. Most of the other increases which he attributes to us are hardly our fault. Nationalised industry finances were rapidly moving out of control when we took office because of high settlements in the last pay round. Higher prices were the inevitable consequence. The Right Honourable Gentleman calls out gas and electricity. He knows that those matters were referred to his price commission, and his price commission on gas recommended far higher price increases than have been implemented. Far higher price increases than have yet been implemented. Milk prices to the farmer and distributor had to go up because the party opposite had delayed them before the election. The mortgage rate had to go up in spite of our efforts to get government borrowing down, and the spendthrift policies advocated by the opposition would have pushed them up even further. Yes, school meal charges have gone up from 25 pence in 2 stages to 35 pence.
If the Right Honourable Lady will look behind her, she will discover the best reason for not allowing television cameras into the chamber.
I see that when I look at the honourable gentleman. Yes, school meals charges have gone up from 25 pence in 2 stages to 35 pence. But the former Secretary of State for Education put them up from 15 to 25 pence in one go, and she announced the increase from 25 to 30 pence well before the election. Mr. Speaker, experience shows that the only sure way of attacking inflation is to keep the money supply closely related to the output of goods and services. Whenever governments have not followed this simple rule, when money is in greater supply than goods, inflation has resulted. It doesn't require A-level economics or artificial labels. Artificial labels like monetarism to understand this. Even the Right Honourable Gentleman seemed to grasp it on the 16th of January 1979 when he said in this House, "I make it clear that we do not intend as a government to finance inflation. We intend to adhere to monetary targets with inevitable effects both on the level of activity in the economy and on the level of unemployment." That was what the Right Honourable Gentleman said then. So we're determined to bring the growth of money supply down, and there are only 2 ways of doing this. 1, by reducing the burden of government borrowing, and 2, by ensuring that borrowing by the private sector does not grow too fast. If one or the other is too high, and if we are to achieve our monetary targets, interest rates inevitably have to rise. That's a situation we've been faced with. May I deal with government borrowing first? Government is borrowing too much because public spending is too high. But the Right Honourable Gentleman has scarcely been helping to get that down. The plans we took over from Labour were totally unrealistic, over 2% growth per year and no allowance for Clegg and the explosion in public service pay. The Clegg Comparability Awards, which the Right Honourable Gentleman left us to honour and pick up, are going to cost an extra $2,000 million next year. And last year's settlements for civil servants and local government staffs will cost another £1,000 million. By the time we took office, we were largely saddled with the opposition's plans for the present financial year. We cut them back as far as we could, £1.5 billion on programmes and another £1 billion through our policy on cash limits. Without that, government borrowing for this year would have been higher, and so too would interest rates. Our revised plans for 1980-81 and later years will be published in a few weeks' time, and they will show substantial cuts on Labour's plans. The opposition will no doubt mount a chorus of complaint. In spite of the fact that a moment ago they were boasting that they were able to cut them by 6% in 1 year under the aegis of the IMF. But what are the alternative policies? Are the opposition suggesting that we put up income tax? They did that in 1974 and 1975. More and more people were brought into tax, and as a result, incentive and enterprise were destroyed. Are they suggesting we borrow even more and allow interest rates to rise still further? The Right Honourable Gentleman seemed to know the answer a year ago. In that same speech, he said, "What would be the result of a small increase in the quantity of money financing very large wage settlements of